For more on the shutdown and the showdown over it, and of course the looming debt ceiling deadline, let's bring in Republican Congressman from New York, Chris Collins. Congressman, it was good to have you on the show. What do you make of what our reporter just said? He was kind of speaking about the New York Times piece this morning that said that frankly investors are worried that Washington doesn't realize the severity of the situation and that politicians, you, Congress, the senators there, are going to push us past the debt ceiling deadline and let us default. How do you respond to that?
Well, Cheryl, we certainly understand the severity of what we're talking about, the current shutdown and the potential default. But what we need to do is sit down like we do in the private sector. I'm a private sector guy, and you get all the parties in a room and you talk. You don't lecture, you talk. And so far what this president has been doing is lecturing Speaker Boehner, lecturing our conference. That's not the way a democracy works. America needs to recall that in the Constitution, it's the House of Representatives that's responsible for taxes, we're responsible for spending, and we're responsible for borrowing, a.k.a. the debt limit.
Well, Congressman, but President Obama just told John Boehner today in a phone call, I'll talk to you after we increase the debt ceiling limit, after October 17th. So let me ask you this. Are House Republicans, are they willing to push this back beyond the 17th? Are you willing to take us into default? Is that on the table?
What will finally occur is up to the president. If he would come in the room this afternoon, I think by this weekend we would have this resolved, call it a mini grand bargain, whatever you may want to call it, talking about tax reform, talking about entitlement reform, admitting that we all know that 30 hours doesn't define a full-time job.
But what if he doesn't, Congressman? What if he doesn't? I mean, John Boehner is strong on his side. The president is standing. No one's blinking. And that's the question for the markets right now. We're a business network. The markets are wondering what you're going to do. Can you give us some sense of what's going to happen here?
I think I can assure you of this. The House of Representatives will not give this president a blank check with a clean CR and a clean increase in the debt ceiling without sitting down and talking about the fundamental reforms we need to deal with the financial deficits that are running up our debt, piling this debt on the backs of our children and grandchildren. The president needs to come in the room and negotiate and talk. That's what a leader is supposed to do. This president's history is of lecturing and pontificating, and what he calls talking does not mean that we have any trust that he would actually negotiate in good faith. He's come over before to say he'll talk to us. What he's done in the past is he lectures us. It's
so
his
basically,
way or the highway.
if you don't get concessions on spending, which is a fair request. I mean, we've had Moody's and S&P talking about, even Ben Bernanke has been critical of the fiscal situation in Washington. If you get some type of agreement when it comes to spending cuts, then maybe we can approve the debt ceiling. Then we can move forward.
Absolutely. It's what do we need to do to get the economy moving, and that speaks to the issue of tax reform. What do we need to do to get our deficits under control? That's entitlement reform. That needs to be the discussion, and it's just unbelievable that this president won't even come in the room and talk to the branch of government that is in control by the Constitution of spending, taxes, and borrowing. It's just, frankly, as a small business guy, I can't believe that he's taken this tack.
And I understand that. You're a small businessman. You're also a mechanical engineer, but you understand how the markets work. And one thing that we've seen, Congressman, is that the prices of credit default swaps, that's basically insurance on treasuries. Those prices are starting to go up. And while we're not seeing a lot of headlines about nervousness in the markets, the money is starting to show that the markets are nervous. Can you picture a scenario where we don't pay interest on treasuries? Can you see that happening in this country?
Well, again, this would come up to Secretary Lew and the President if, in fact, we did not increase the debt ceiling and they ran out of extraordinary measures, what they might prioritize or not. But what I'd also like to remind everyone is if we're going to worry about interest rates in the future, a runaway deficit and ever-increasing debt is really going to put our long-term interest rates in an upward mode, because of the risk associated with a country where our debt to GDP is growing leaps leaps and bounds is the bigger risk, frankly, than what I see this temporary situation. We have to get our deficits under control. We need to reduce the slope of those deficits related to GDP, and we have to show when we're going to land in a balanced situation. So for this, our children and grandchildren, we can start repaying this debt, not just keep adding to it.
Okay. Well, again, that deadline is approaching. Certainly, we're going to be watching you and, of course, other House Republicans as well. Congressman Collins from New York. Congressman, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Cheryl.
I want to let everybody know